totally forgot to do that.
That's okay. Your timing is timely. My name is Meredith Green. I run my own firm, Socius Amica. And, a lot of what we do as our bread and butter work is actually coordinated public transit human service planning. It was my very first project that I won when I started my firm a couple of years ago. I have been working in this field for, it'll be 20 years in January. It is like my favorite subject of all time because what I like the most about it, just from my perspective, is you can take this formulaic thing that the government basically says we have to do, we have to coordinate, and you have to check off all these boxes, and it has to include these things, and it's for this funding. And you can kind of do that, but also not make it boring and meet the needs of your regional population, and also include other politically and socially marginalized populations while you're doing that. So, I am of the mindset that I don't like to just check the boxes in this process. Like, I like to make it valuable for all of the parties involved. So you all as transit providers and as health and human service providers, regional governments, and then the people that are your customers. Because otherwise, then why would we even bother? So I think there's a lot of ways we can do that. So I got my start at Capital Metro in Austin, Texas as a transit planner. And a year into that, they threw me into the first regional transit coordinating committee that served the 10-county area in Austin, Texas. And in those days, we didn't have a policy or even a procedure for how we were going to do the work. We just had a House Bill 3588 out of this great state of Texas then, that told us, like, hey, here's what you have to do. You have to start coordinating for a myriad of reasons. And we really dove into it, learning from one another and learning what we should and shouldn't be doing and the like. And so I later parlayed that into researching how do we make this more effective and how can we fold more funding sources into it? Because 5310 funding, the reason we do coordinated planning is really limited. It's not enough. And I feel like everyone, including our customers, they're always asking us to do more with less. And so it's the how do we make it work? So, fast forward to 20 years later, the reason I started my company is that I found a number of small urban and rural providers of service, whether health and human service or transit, needed some support on how to untangle this and figure it out. And there were a lot of larger companies, some of whom I worked for, that really weren't getting into that work anymore, either because budgets weren't there or, they couldn't afford a larger company. And I didn't like that at all. Like, I really want to help. This is absolutely my bread and butter and my favorite type of work. So that's a little bit about my background. Obviously I got my start in Texas, but I've been in Colorado now 4 years, and it is my home state and I love it with a fierce passion. And as Dana will attest, I will fight to the death and die on the hill of all things mobility and transportation. So that's my background. I just kind of wanted to give you some context as to how I ended up here. And so that brings us to your plan and gaps analysis. And I'm going to ask, do you guys remember that gaps analysis that was conducted in 2021 for your region? Any thoughts about it?
I wasn't here at the time.
You
so-
weren't here? Where were
Well,
you?
I was in Summit County, but I wasn't in this position. I was just a
Gotcha.
bus driver, so.
Oh, I love it. I love the bus drivers that work their way up. It makes me so happy. So what are your initial thoughts on that plan that was conducted? You seem to have some, so I'm looking at you.
I don't know. I don't remember.
You don't remember?
No,
I feel like
I would have to pull it up.
still have the same gaps.
Oh, totally, probably.
I mean, I feel like we
I
could
don't
like
think
slap another
any-
year on it. We could slap like 2024 on it and it would still be
Probably,
same.
yeah.
real, pretty much,
Yeah.
mostly.
Except there's one thing I think in the transit gap analysis that
is going to be addressed that I just heard about from Bustang. They are increasing westbound service. They're doubling it essentially.
Mhm.
So, and that was identified in this as like, there's not enough service from Glenwood to Grand Junction.
Right,
And they're gonna, because that is their highest ridership line, they're gonna dump a lot of money into that in the next year, which is great. So I would say that's the only thing that's going to change, on that gap analysis.
Well, is it gonna be, westbound from, Denver to Grand Junction, or, cause you.
I think it's Glenwood to Grand Junction specifically, that
Okay.
they're gonna increase the number of trips.
Cause the one thing that we get phone calls all the time about, it's not that big of a deal in my estimation, but people wanna get from Breckenridge to Vale all the time. And there's very limited transportation for
Mhm.
that aspect. And I mean, granted, that's the tourist, it's not the workers, the locals. And Summit Stage doesn't go in that direction. But it is something that we get called about a lot.
that's interesting.
So there is Pegasus and Bustang. And Pegasus has helped tremendously. They have a lot more service than Bustang.
Now, is Pegasus a private provider?
No, it's part of Bustang, but it's a van.
Oh,
It's a van.
okay, so it's different than Outrider and all that jazz.
Right.
So there's
It's on the same website.
we're diving right in here, but I'm just gonna take some notes as y'all kind of brainstorm. So service,
I mean, it's mainly Breck to Vale, but they would get on it for Frisco, I mean.
And folks on the phone, if you feel free to jump in at any time too.
And,
yeah, go ahead.
and then what I was talking with Dana about, a huge gap that was identified before, and I'm trying to rectify, and my hand has been slapped a little bit. Between Silverthorne and Kremling. And in that line up to Steamboat eventually. I mean, Summit Stage wouldn't be going up to Steamboat, but. Silverthorne to Kremling is desperately needed.
Spell that, so I'm not.
KR.
Thank you. KR.
EMM. LING.
Got it. Like,
And Kremling is interesting because it's like this stopping point for a lot of folks that are going to Summit County and also going to Steamboat. So there's like a lot going on right there, but not a lot going on, if you get what I'm saying. Like,
There's not much in Kremling.
yeah,
But there's a lot of traffic going through there.
right, so it's like these rural things that
And-
happen.
And for us in particular, it's the last relatively inexpensive place for workers to live.
That was my other
That's a
thought.
big thing. A lot of workers live there. We already service Fairplay and Leadville, where the rest of our workers live. And so Kremlin,
Right.
Leadville has gotten expensive now. And Kremlin and Fairplay are still pretty relatively.
Relatively affordable.
Yes.
Of course.
In comparison.
Yes.
You can get a trailer for only $250,000.
There you go.
That's a little bit of an
No, but
exaggeration.
like Durango, it's very much that same way, and a lot of it is, how do we deal with the workforce and getting them where they need to go, which is where, I mean, this completely falls in that line, is like the workforce housing situation and where people need to go.
Mhm. I mean,
so-
I live up there. I live 10 minutes from Kremlin.
Yeah, I was reflecting on that yesterday because I stay a variety of places depending on actually what gives me the best government rate, for travel. And so I was over in Westvale and I was driving around and I saw the post office. The post office there, first of all, is massive. But the very next thought that I had was, where do all these people who work at the post office live? Because if you're a postal worker, I'm sure you're not pulling down, $250,000.
Yeah.
Like, how do you?
Well, they live out here for
Mhm.
West Vale, they live in Gypsum.
Yeah,
This
so you
is-
have that
Zero.
commute, you have that
Mhm.
commute, right? And so then what does that look like for you? And if you can't afford a vehicle and so on and so forth, so you get where I'm going. Let's back up a bit. Cause everyone loves talking about all the things that we have and the needs and gaps, and so let's talk through what this whole facilitation is gonna look like today. Because I want it, like I said, I want it to be valuable for you all. So one of the things that Dana sent out was a survey, which I could not pull up because Microsoft just hates me.
I'm sorry, our
It's okay.
platform is terrible that we have to use.
So I might need on break, I might need to take a glance at that and make sure that, because I want to reference it in here and
Sure.
I need to refresh my brain. So what we're gonna do is talk about like who we are, who is the RTCC, what are we doing, what's our purpose? How do we show up to meetings? What's our motivation for showing up to meetings? How can we make us the most effective group possible for what the needs are of our region? So we're gonna talk through all of that. We're going to jump back to that 2021 plan. I'm gonna pull up some reference points and some recommendations. The 2021 plan, as far as coordinated plans go, is not bad. I mean, I've seen a lot of plans over the course of 20 years for a lot of different areas, and some of them are really horrific. So this is a great start. There are a couple elements that are missing that I like to see in the coordinated plans, which includes an updated demographic analysis. One of the things that was in your 2021 plan, I talked to Dana about this, so this is not any surprise, but the data from that plan was pulled from 2020. And I do a whole separate training on census and the impact and why the 2020 census was pure garbage. But I don't love that the data was from that, because I think if you pull from more recent data, like last year's American Community Survey, you'll begin to see more relevant and up-to-date numbers for obvious reasons. So I really want to talk through the demographics a little bit. We'll touch on it today. That would be something that I would update, or if I were you, I would update it. And then the other thing that's interesting about that particular plan from 2021 is that there are recommendations based on the gaps analysis, but there aren't any goals. So to me, that's the equivalent of kind of like kicking an anthill and then watching the ants spin out with no direction or cohesive anything. Because if you're making these recommendations, then it's like, but for what are we trying to achieve as a region? And so goals are super important. And so that's what we're going to work on today, is actual goal setting and putting together some draft goals for the region, so that as you move forward and you tend to update these plans, and when these plans get updated, you have like kind of a North Star that you've all agreed to, like, hey, we want to do these things. And if something falls outside of the purview of one of those goals, you can say, well, maybe we don't focus on that now because we agreed to follow these things. So we're going to do some goal setting today. And we're going to run through the recommendations, like we kind of started touching on, like, hey, here's some gaps, here's some issues. So what do we need to do to continue to move forward? And I'm just guiding this discussion. I want everything to be from you all. So part of it is, as we're talking through things today, and if you get a thought or, something that comes and you are like, I need to write that down, I put Post-its and pens on the table so you can make notes for yourself or for me or the group as a whole. So help yourself to those if you want to write things down. So that's kind of what we're attempting to do today. Does that make sense? Does everyone? Yes?
Mhm.
Folks online, are you good?
We're good.
Cool.
Let me try does my audio work on the Zoom? Do you hear me okay?
Yes, Steve. I'm just making
Okay,
sure that folks don't have questions on Zoom.
Yeah, I'll probably leave my video off just so that'll help me have a better audio connection anyhow.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so the first question we have is, who are we? And so I'm gonna just open it up. And we're gonna talk through what, real or perceived, who are you guys? What are we doing here? Who's RTCC? tell, like, if I am an outsider, let's say I'm someone you met on the street, or I'm a friend at happy hour, and you're like, oh, I'm working, with the RTCC, how would you describe who you are?
A group that's trying to coordinate regional transportation.
I love that answer.
Yes.
So what does that mean? Regional transportation.
Well, all of our communities, pretty sure all of our communities here, they have their own independent transit, but there's nothing linking these communities together.
Okay. Who else?
In addition to coordinating, we have spent a lot of time looking at the gaps, and I will say, looking at the gaps, because I think individual transit organizations have done a lot of work in addressing those within their communities. But I think as an RTCC, we have that report from 3 years ago, which did a good job outlining it, but we haven't done anything about it. So we've been real good at looking at stuff.
A great way of putting it.
I'm gonna underline the looking part. So not just in the communities, but region as a whole.
Yes.
So good plan, no action.
I think it's just been recently that we, under Dana, we've had the opportunity for leadership in that way.
Okay,
That I think in the past it's been pretty reactive.
right.
Now we have the opportunity to be proactive. And I think in that time period, that's when we lost a lot of the engagement.
Well, yeah, because there's a lot that goes on in everyone's day-to-day existence, both personally and professionally. And there's, I think, especially as a transit provider or even as a health and human service provider, you're kind of putting out all of these little micro fires for various things. And I think, one of the most significant things is just acknowledging that in that time from 2021 to now, like, we were still in the thick of a pandemic, and then there's all this other stuff that's happening, that it's, I don't think we actually recovered from, right? So just acknowledging, like, hey, it's been kind of a journey these last few years for some of us, especially for providers. And this is where I'm not picking, but especially given that funding flowing down from CDOT sometimes is not as reliable as we would like, right?
Mhm.
So, like, we have to look at it as holistically and acknowledge, like, hey, maybe we haven't had a chance to deal with this until just now, right? Thoughts, Jonathan?
Yeah, way back in the days of yore. When we started this, I was lucky enough to be in the very first meeting. So it was really kind of a look at who was out there and providing service.
Okay,
And one of the main goals was to eliminate 2 vans with 1 person traveling from Walden to Denver.
right,
And somebody who lived in Walden who could not get any treatment because they had no clue
right,
what was out there. And got together as a group just to figure out who was out there and who was doing what. And there was also kind of cost savings
right,
enterprise in that who has resources that somebody else could use.
sure,
For example, and I'll pick on another provider for paratransit service. They don't have any mechanics. We do. So if their lift is not working, rather than drive to Denver, they could drive over to our shop. And if it was just a fuse, we could replace that. It was a major overhaul. They needed to go to Denver, but I was trying to do that just because everybody has such limited resources and funding, finding volunteer drivers. just who's doing what. But I think it was more geared towards really medical and veteran transportation at the time.
Correct.
And then we became a call center and we were like, you know, scheduling rides and really, yeah, ENMT. So like, we're not that anymore. And we haven't been for what, 3 years? Probably. So. Yeah, we've just been meeting to meet.
Yeah.
Like,
That's what I was
I mean, we
gonna
have
say.
good conversations,
Meetings.
but to Aaron's point, like, we don't have like a structure of like. You know,
Well, and part of that was that we were doing a good job and nobody else in the state was. And so they went to a statewide broker. That
For
was
NEMT.
Right,
gotcha.
but was also. We were doing a good job in that we were doing that, but we were also saying, well, that doesn't qualify, but. You could. Call these people and maybe be able to help.
Gotcha.
Um,
I know.
Steve, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to point that out that that's all we used to do was just NEMT and veterans going to medical appointments was the whole purpose of RTCC, which was very limited. We have much broader transportation needs in our 6-county region. And that's why we started trying to reimagine what RTCC should be and what we could be working on. And that's connecting these various transit systems that are local for, the different valleys, but they didn't have connections between them. And to have the transportation not just be for Medicaid and veterans, but for, I guess the first group would be for any senior citizen, but then I think just for the general population. If we can make a transportation system that works for those who are in most need of it, it would work for other people too.
Right.
So that's why we're doing this whole process to try to expand the role of RTCC to something much bigger than it used to be and get not just meet for the sake of meeting, but actually be really accomplishing something. And that's why we're here today. And that's why we're having the summit in September.
I love what you just said. And that is like this perfect way for me to tee up a couple of things. Also to promote your summit. So when Dana was trying to plan for this facilitation and like figure out what it is that we're gonna be doing and what needs to happen, she sent me a plan, a coordinated plan with Mobility for All in Boulder. And I was like, she's like, I really like this. I want something like this, something that, and I said, okay. Well, I said, that's convenient for you because I did that plan. And I think that's what I was going to mention based on the comment that you just made was that's the direction that Boulder County was headed. And I'll give you a little bit of context for them because here's the thing. Every coordinated plan is different. And it really is based on the population served, the geography of the region, the types of providers, historical context, which is why I love this because it's so fun to me to help facilitate these things. But in the case of Boulder County, they had never done a coordinated plan before independently because they were always part of DRCOG. And there was a kerfuffle, as it were, with Denver and the RTD. Because there was a lot of funding in the region and, and when you're around Denver, as you know, the focus goes to Denver as opposed to places like Boulder who are really, have some different dynamics. So, one of the things that they did and this goes to what you were talking about, is they said, we want to take this coordinated plan, this mobility for all, and make it so that it's not just, the typical veterans and older adults and individuals with disabilities. We want to include mobility for all, like we want to look at everything holistically. And so they were one of the actual leaders on bringing in safe routes to school into their plan, as well as an active transportation angle, as well as a lot of different groups who would otherwise not traditionally be included in these plans. And so and plus tourism, volunteer drivers, like they were like, we want to look at all of it. Let's do the whole thing. And so that is, the impetus behind their plan. And this kind of tees up your summit, because you're going to be hearing from Angel Bond, who I worked for. And she's just a really brilliant mind as far as, really changing the game with coordinated planning. So definitely attend the summit, because she's great. And I really, really have a lot of respect for her. And they're great folks to learn from. So in that context, when we look at your region, maybe we should, before we start forming your vision, just pivot and say, okay, based on that, and knowing that we're making this change from, this whole NEMT context, individuals with disabilities and older adults and veterans, who are we serving? And so what I want you to do next, flip this post-it and get a different colored marker. We're going to talk about, yes, our customers are all, but who are our customers? So that's what I want to hear from you all as we broaden this discussion. So that being said, who are our customers?
Folks on Zoom, do you want to chime in?
So I would say, well, first of all, seniors would be probably our primary target for our number one audience. But I would also put in commuters going to work, just anybody in the workforce needing to go to work. Anybody with going to medical appointments, especially those who don't have their own transportation, no matter what their age group or what their profession or whatever. People going to get their groceries, essential things that they need, groceries, picking up medications, going to doctor's appointments are probably three of the most important for a lot of people.
I think Dave has his mic off. Do you want to go ahead, Dave?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it is for us residents, people going to work, appointments, and in our area, we have a fair amount of tourism, so a lot of that as well.
So I have a question, and I think I need, this is me getting in the weeds and being like, but our bylaws. So the bylaws very clearly state who our customers are. Is part of the reason that we are meeting today to actually update, I mean, we're talking about like fundamentally changing those, like something that was formed 10 years ago. Is that?
Yeah,
Potentially.
that's a really great point.
Because I would have answered that and been like, see the bylaws. It
Yeah.
says what we are.
Yeah.
But also 10 years ago, we're, let's evolve, right? So I think that's just some clarity that I would like is like, are we having this discussion because we are evolving, and that means like updating the foundational documents?
I would say probably yes. unless folks want to stay the same, which I don't even know what that is, and I mean, it was clear from kind of that free work that we did, even though we only got 8 responses, people don't know what we're doing and what our purpose is. So
Right.
that to me means we've gotta like make some big changes with this group or we dissolve. Which I don't think that's
And
an
you don't
option.
want that. You don't,
No.
that is definitely not an option.
No,
You don't want that.
no.
Okay, we've got that established.
Yes.
All right.
There is, another partner consulting firm that I partner with on a number of things. And he made this sticker. I love him because he's about to retire, and so he made this sticker that he passes out at transit conferences that says, "That's the way we've always done it," with a red line through it. And anytime anyone says that kind of stuff, I'm like, oh, Kenny. So, which, by the way, I am working with them on an update. Casta is sponsoring
Oh, cool.
for the volunteer driver toolkit.
That's great.
That sounds awesome. I can't wait to see that.
I'm so excited. We just kicked it off in July, and so stay tuned.
Nice.
I know, I love doing research, so very excited. But y'all were talking volunteer drivers, so I'm like, oh, there's new information coming out. Okay, so I digress, but what else? Who are our customers? Like, let's just keep doing a metaphorical vomit of information here. Who else?
Who's
Anybody?
a tourist?
Dave did.
I think ourselves.
Yeah.
We're the customer.
I like that, and a lot of people catch that, and they're like, oh, we are.
And Hope came off of mute too. Go ahead, Hope.
Yeah, I definitely think seniors who do want to stay in their homes have trouble getting transportation. I know ones that are in like a senior center do have transportation, but I know the ones that stay in their homes that have Medicare, they really struggle because they don't have the money to. And then I believe that people with disabilities also have issues because there's not a lot of option of places that have lifts or ramps. I know people that do use a wheelchair can't always use MedRide, especially where we're at, because there are not accessible vehicles.
Wait, what? MedRide?
People can't always use MedRide. Can you repeat that, Hope?
Yeah, so people that are in wheelchairs can't always use MedRide because sometimes their vehicles, where we are located, at least in Craig, don't have a lift or a ramp, so they are kind of stuck with using us because there's not very many people with accessible van.
Surprised they haven't had like some sort of lawsuit.
Yeah,
If you're a MedRide and you don't have a wave vehicle, that's shocking.
I don't know.
Huh. That's mind blowing to me. Okay, that's a big deal.
That's kind of our area too in Elgin. There's no paratransit.
Well, and I think that's gonna be. There's a couple of things that I'll mention, visual disabilities. Yeah, so there are a lot of. Say a lot, but there are a lot of older adults in the generalized region. Some of whom have been here, like our lifers, some of whom decided to bring, their money and retire here, but that doesn't mean that they won't necessarily need services. Cause this is exactly what we're dealing with my in-laws right now. Is they're, they chose to move to Durango, and now it's like, oh, what do we do for the long haul? And so you've got this aging population that is going to need some manner of attention, which is why I was like, hey, you probably need to update your demographics because COVID did change everything in a lot of ways and it displaced everybody, right? Quite a few people. So that's one thing. The other thing that y'all mentioned was, because you asked about the tourist element. Tourists are a big deal. But if you picture it outside of the typical tourist and say, what if I have tourists who are older adults? What if I have tourists who are individuals with disabilities? And you look at everything holistically and say that, all things can fall into all the categories. The other thing that we haven't touched on are, I would say ethnic minorities and, in a lot of other areas, we do deal with the tribal transportation challenges. Less so here, but those are elements as well. Like who are we dealing with? Another thing I would put on here is youth, which is what Boulder County did. And in particular, at-risk youth and or those who just, may come from households that have zero to no vehicles. And then how do we make it work, right? So in some cases, that's the challenge, especially in rural areas, is that it doesn't just fall to school transportation. You see a lot of kids that ride the bus to get to school. So I'm just kind of doing your holistic thoughts here. Other comments on who our customers are? What does your bylaw say? I'm curious now.
Veterans, people with disabilities, older adults, and low
Low income.
income.
Yeah, that's accurate. So then if you look at it from a broader perspective and say, and then that also would include elements of your workforce, your commuters, people who may not otherwise be able to afford transportation,
Yeah.
right?
So here's my question for you as the facilitator,
Sure.
because I look at this and I'm like, cool, our customers are
Everyone. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that feels very overwhelming to me. And I'm
Right.
like, okay, so where do we even start? Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, how do you even start to target and frame a conversation around this when we're like, okay, we got to fix all the problems for all the people?
Definitely, and it does feel overwhelming. So the first thing we're going to do is formulate a vision for your region. And when we get down into the detail, that's when we're gonna form some strategies and build on the recommendations that you had in your 2021 plan that are more specific, that do target these specific populations that your bylaws initially reference, and then build on that. Because I think the thing that people get themselves into like a little trap with is they don't have enough specificity in the recommendations to even make anything work. You do have to picture RTCC and the region as a whole like a giant iceberg. And you just have to chip away at it and keep with the little victories. It was kind of like that one-off conversation we had that you two were having before we even started, like, oh, great, we have something we can do. We have a specific item. So what we do so that it doesn't become overwhelming is we will start with your broader vision and goals, and then start with just a barrage of strategies. We can take the recommendations and say, okay, we have some recommendations here. I don't remember them. I haven't memorized your recommendations.
Neither have I.
But we do things more specifically and say, okay, I have this specific project that I am working on. I'm looking at Anne because she brought it up over here that needs attention. And so that's one thing we can do. And then we target other specific things, specific to commuter populations. We have an issue with Silverthorne and Kremlin, right? We need to address that. And so we will prattle off this whole list of things, and then y'all get to prioritize them. And I'm a little iffy about doing the prioritization today just because we have a smaller audience. I like to have the whole group involved in that part. But at the very least, what we can do is do this whole wave of strategies, things that do address the specifics so that we don't get overwhelmed with the everyone, right? So I'll give you an example. I most recently finished the coordinated plan for Santa Barbara County for their Association of Governments. And it was the same thing. Obviously in Santa Barbara, they have a ton of older adults, but then those older adults also hold hands with individuals with disabilities. Sometimes it's the same, one and the same. They actually have the Chumash tribe in the middle of the county. And that tribe also has a giant casino that holds events and they don't provide transportation. And so then you've got all these people coming to concerts that are, drinking and having a great time, which is lovely. But then it's like, what do we do with these people who are driving? Can we please provide, You know, so one of their specific recommendations was if there's a special event that is held in the county that needs permitting, you're required to figure out transportation to and from that event. So people aren't driving. So it's, you know, so yes, it's all, but then we get into the specifics. Stuff like that. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay, hopefully that's helpful. Because I'm the same way. I'm like, I'm going to completely spin out over all of it. And I'm here to help you break down the process.
I think there's a lot already here. It's just a matter of getting it written down. Like we've
Yeah.
talked about a lot of things, like we've talked about the gaps in Elgibel. We're talking about Kremling to Silverthorne. Hope has brought up several times, like we need bus staying from Craig to Grand Junction. We, you know, exactly what she just mentioned, like sometimes their meta rides are not even equipped to handle folks where they live. So I think it's pulling these thorns in each one of our communities and saying, hey, RTCC, how do we work on this?
Right.
Come up with a solution together. Because maybe it's something that they don't have capacity for, or maybe it needs, like in Anne's case, she's like, I don't know who to talk to in Kremling. Now she's got a connection in Kremling. Now we need to pull in Grand County, have a bigger conversation around.
Right.
Okay,
We need some structure.
yeah,
And ultimately, my perfect vision for you all would be that we formulate your vision, your goals, and your strategy recommendations. You prioritize which ones you want to tackle first. We attach, this is what I do. We do the strategies, we attach a timeline to them. Not all of them are going, your 5310 is not going to
No.
fulfill that need. So then I take your matrix of strategies and say, yes, 5310, but also there's this grant, there's this grant. We did a whole giant matrix for
Mhm.
Mobility for All because they were acutely aware that this isn't gonna, you know, it's spread thin. How do we make it all work?
and
Right?
maybe we don't need funding for some of it. Maybe it's a matter of banding
Conversation.
together,
Right.
advocacy, like, you know, having us as this body of like,
Right,
we
exactly.
agree on this, we prioritize this. You know, there's strength in numbers, so.
Yeah, and a lot of it for them too was sometimes just education. And the CAG in their case said, oh, we can create these educational materials just to distribute at libraries and at doctor's appointments and let people know that these services exist.
Mhm.
And here's what we're doing to move everything forward. Their RTCC basically agreed to meet quarterly, but then they have these one-off committees that tackle specific strategy issues together. So it might be 2 or 3 people that come back to the RTCC and report. So not everything falls to one single person or one single agency. It's about making it more actionable, right? And so that's how you keep moving forward.
A conversation that I had with Dawn, who's not here, she's with RAFTA. Just around who is the RTCC and what do we want to be, is how can we actually empower those that are using the services? How can we invite them to the table to become leaders, to become decision makers? Because yes, we know a lot of this stuff, but we don't know everything. I mean, we're not. Sometimes we're riders, but I don't think we are the riders that we are talking about. And so how are we getting confident in our own vision and mission and goals to where we can say, all right, we are missing folks. We need them at the table. How do we, A, develop relationships with them before we invite them to the table and have an ask? What does that look like? And then how are they just as a part of this process as we are?
Agreed, I think that's.
Great
what we're
questions.
missing is
Yeah.
actually like a
We are missing,
consumer here.
we are missing
Yeah.
consumers and people that actually use our transit.
I think we've kind of morphed into 2 different directions though. I think there's still that need. I'll get there for this, way back when. But there's still that need for the person that lives in rural. And I'm gonna defend people, true, maybe Northwest Colorado. They live in Craig, they need dialysis. Your choices
Right.
are Vail or Wyoming. or Grand Junction. So I think that need is still there. That group is really focused around medical providers, vets, seniors, that the disabled community. And now there's kind of a new exciting, I kind of call it exciting, true regional transportation coordination, which is for all.
Right.
We don't, we're here to pick up anybody and everybody. How do we get those people moved? And bluntly, I don't really deal much with medical transportation. I mean, I do our paratransit, we have all lift equipped vehicles, we need all the ADA things, but I'm really not there to help somebody get from dinosaur to dialysis.
Sure.
But I can really be helpful with busing, regional transportation, that kind of thing. So I think maybe some of the loss of interest is just people get on the meetings and hear one thing and they're like, that's not my area of expertise. And I think that if we were to identify, this is for the medical vet, all that, this area of focus is for true regional
Right.
connectivity.
Which then could be working groups.
Yeah, 100%. And that's how I tell all the RTCCs that are out there to kind of keep their steam going forward. Because it's just too much. It's the iceberg. It's too much for one single group to bite off and it feels overwhelming. So with all that being said, let's jump into forming a vision. Do you guys have a vision in your bylaws? That's a good question that I have. While she's looking that up, I'm going to tell you an interesting story. So when we started surveying the community in Santa Barbara about public and human services transportation need. So we were like, hey, how was it perceived? What's the gaps? Let's figure this out. There were a couple of interesting things that came out of the survey specifically that I wanted to share with you because I think they're somewhat relevant to everybody. Number one that we noticed with their survey was that we had a really great swath of respondents. So it actually wasn't just older adults. We had older adults, individuals with disabilities, and then we had someone that fell into every bracket from 18 all the way to 75, 80, which was fascinating to me. But another thing that was important that you don't think about a lot, I didn't, since COVID, when we were asking people, what do you need transportation to? And we had them rank, like, what do you need it to? And you would think the obvious things, like, I need to go buy groceries. I need to get to my doctor's appointment. I need to get to work. The number one response on more than one question relative to that topic was social outings. So if you look at it from this broader picture of we went through the pandemic, people weren't as concerned with, getting groceries, or maybe it just, it fell less to this whole, I need to get out and socialize and get out and go to my community center or the senior center or the rec. Those were very important things. And I think, yes, there are also mission critical appointments here, like dialysis. They cannot be overlooked, but there's also this need to get out and socialize. And so if we're looking at everything from that perspective, especially from those who live in rural communities that are either older adults, individuals with disabilities, one of the things that was brought up, I think, by someone on the phone is the seniors who want to maintain their quality of life. That's a huge value statement for them. Have we found anything?
So we have a standard operating procedure.
That's
Which-
that's.
Which
when
looks like,
refer
I mean,
to the
this is
bylaws,
like,
that's what
yeah, this is
yeah.
bylaws. So we have an objective. We do not have
You don't have a vision?
a vision or a mission. This is just how we're coordinated, what the structure of the RTCC is, when we meet, but the objective is basically, I guess, the mission. It says the objective of the RTCC is to serve as the local coordinating council for 7 counties, for a 7-county rural area of Colorado, including Eagle, Garfield, Grand, Jackson, Route, Pitkin, and Summit counties, and to provide regional transportation coordination, especially for the veteran, people with disabilities, older adults, and lower income adult populations.
So that's actually not bad. It's
That sounds
wordy.
like a vision to me.
Yeah, that's a vision. So I think, I mean, if anything, you're looking at the broader picture, something mentioning regional mobility might be an aspect, but that's actually not terrible. So,
We're not terrible.
Of course, we're not terrible. We're just,
Dismissed.
this is fine. No,
this is fine, we're done.
The fires, the room's on fire.
Can you
No.
share that with everybody?
Yeah, I was
Yes.
like, Dana, we need to kind of break, maybe write that down and put it on the wall, because I like where that's going.
Okay.
I think that's a great start.
Yeah.
But is it 7 or 6 counties? Color me confused.
It's 7.
Okay,
That's Northwest Cog serves a 7-county region.
okay. And RTCC does also?
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, we are made up of that 7-county region. If people show up.
Route Summit, Eagle, Pitkin, and not Jackson anymore.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
RTCC
we have
is
7.
bigger. Yeah,
We're bigger.
RTCC is bigger than COG.
which is what you want, right?
Garfield's always been sort of our lame, I don't know, our orphan county, because they're actually part of the Associated Governments of Northwest Colorado.
that's
Is their council of governments, but everything from the Eagle County, to get from one part of Eagle County to the other part, you have to go through Glenwood Springs, which is in Garfield County. The whole
Right.
Roaring Fork Valley is very involved with Garfield, so Garfield totally has to be involved in this,
Yeah.
and they should be rightfully part of RTCC. And I don't know whether they officially are or how that
They are.
works, but
They just don't show up.
Since Judy retired. Cause Judy
Yeah.
was involved.
Yep, since Judy retired. And RAFTA serves
Yeah,
most of Garfield County, whether or not the whole county puts in.
Sure.
So and they are,
Which is what you want. I mean, because
yeah,
like, so when I was working in capital area RTCC, it was, the MPO was only 6 counties. You know, Capital Metro served 3 of those 6. CARTS, the rural provider, served the rest, but then there was another rural provider in another county that fell within the COG boundary and the RTCC boundary, which is how it became 10 counties, because there wasn't a home. And so it's kind of like all are welcome, and we go to the biggest boundary extent possible, because travelers, dialysis clinics, nobody sees county lines, and even state lines for that matter, as a thing. No one cares. It's like, oh, I've got to get here. How do I get to that place? So we would always go to the largest boundary extent possible. And to that end, I think that objective, which I think we should kind of formulate into a more formalized mission statement,
I'll write it down,
stands within
but
reason.
I need to write it here first.
Okay. So that's a thought. And if we're building on that, then what I would tell us to do next is to talk about goals, but I wanted to see how I'm looking over your shoulder. Okay, we're taking a break at noon. And it's 11:15, right? Okay. Give or take. So let's just keep trucking ahead and dive into goals while we're sorting out this vision. Does that work for you all?
Mhm.
Okay, cool. And also I'm sweating. Can we turn the air on?
Yeah.
This would happen because I was wearing a jacket this morning.
And now it's 40 degrees hotter.
Well,
Well, it will be.
it was so great running this morning though, because it was 48 and I could see my breath and I was like, I'm living, I'm alive. It has gotten,
It's lovely. Yeah.
it's gotten so hot in the mornings in Durango that if you're going out after 9:30, like forget about it.
Oh, if you're going out past 7, where I live, forget about it.
But I was living my best life this morning at 6:30.
I love it.
Okay. So let's talk through goals and what they are. And let me pause it, and I don't want to leave people out who are online. Did you guys have any other comments or questions as we move forward?
I don't at this point. This is Dave.
Thanks, Dave. Okay,
I have some thoughts about specific instances where I can think of where there are gaps in our transportation, but maybe we talk more about that later.
can you?
Or do
Yeah,
you want to hear, do you want to hear them now?
we are gonna talk about those, so can you make a note to yourself, since I gave everyone else Post-it notes, but since you're not here, grab a little notepad and write them down. And in fact, I'm gonna give you guys, you have stuff, but if y'all need, you know, if y'all need to write thoughts down too, as we're plugging along, because I hate it when I have like a good idea and I don't want to lose it. And I don't, these pens are before COVID, so God knows if they work, I'm sorry. Okay. So let's talk through goals and goal setting and what that means. Are y'all doing okay? Do we need a quick break or we're good? Good, okay. The way I like to work with coordinated advisory committees and RTCCs on formulating goals, because that can also be overwhelming in and of itself, is let's just start with themes. And themes are typically one-word statements of things that we know we probably need to work on or tackle, or things of value that the RTCC would have as a whole. So, for example, some previous themes that have come out of other coordinated groups include safety. They include finance and funding. It varies. There's one specific to health, I think, and mobility for all. And so it really depends on what you all see as a group as a whole. In some cases, it's planning and operations, very specific, that we formulate a goal statement around. So take a minute. I'm gonna actually have you guys, would it be better for me to write on the Post-it pad, like different thoughts that y'all have? Sure. Okay. Let me give Dana a second to.
Sorry, this is long.
No, it's okay. We need this, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna give Dana a second. Give Dana a second to write this down, and then we will start putting together some themes.
Y'all.
If it makes you feel any better, one time I was helping a transit agency in rural Mineral Wells, Texas, do their mission statement. And I said, when was the last time you updated it? And they were like, oh, probably 10 or 15 years ago. And I said, can I see it?
This was
And
last updated in 2017, by the way.
that's great.
So
I think I feel good about that. And so they pulled out their mission statement, and I kid you not, it was 2 pages long. I'm like, oh, this isn't a
That's a
mission
lot.
statement. This is a diatribe. We gotta whittle it down, honey. This is good. I like this. So I'm gonna hang it over here, and then we're gonna start throwing out some themes for those.
I would say one of the big themes is gaps in transit.
Gaps in transit or gaps in service.
Yeah.
I couldn't get that bridge over there earlier either.
hello, the other side.
It's mystery. What other themes do we have?
I'm sorry, catch me up. Are these RTCC themes or?
So what we're going to do next is formulate goals, but that in and itself, as I explained, can be daunting. And so sometimes what we do is we just say, okay, what are the common themes that we need to either tackle or that we collectively agree are a thing? And so, for example, I said for others, it might be safety or funding and finance, planning and operation. We talked about the gaps. So what other, and you can cheat and use any of the themes that I've, previously mentioned, if they feel relevant to your region.
Okay. Well, I think you said social was one of the big things, and that is a lot of our, older adults, they would like to use transportation to do social events, or even their medical appointments are their social activities.
Oh, that's an interesting point. So. I like that. We're gonna frame that up.
Okay.
Did you want to add?
Not yet.
Other thoughts?
I don't know if this falls. under
Freedom from
gaps.
isolation.
Freedom from isolation. I like how you said that. I'm gonna add that here.
Okay, these may fall under gap, these may.
And
be
that's okay.
separate.
All this
Okay.
holds hands. It's okay.
But, and then totally one of the things that I was gonna say. We talk a lot about the last mile. I think that Mustang, Pegasus can be really great solutions. And for people who might have some mobility concerns, it gets you to a certain point, but if I still have a mile to my house, that is.
It's a lot.
It is a lot.
Yes.
I remember the other one. Volunteer drivers, like, I don't think that we can look to public transportation to solve all of these things. And for whatever reason, there are areas where it is so difficult because various organizations have tried to stand up volunteer driver programs and they just haven't been successful. But I feel like being able to tap into other modes of transportation, especially for older adults, like volunteer driver programs are they can be pretty great, but we just struggle with them in some areas.
Well, and I mean. When I was doing, the coordinated plan for the Matsu Borough in Alaska, so that's north of Anchorage, about 45 minutes. And it's a span for them is as big as the state of West Virginia for their coordinated area. And it was the same thing in that there are areas where people need service, but I can't get a bus there. And especially in the winter, it's extremely problematic. So what do we do?
Yeah.
And that was one of the topics that we had to talk about. So I can see that here, similarly in certain areas, especially in the winter, it could be problematic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and that kind of ties into everything, right? The freedom from isolation, the gaps, the volunteer driver.
I think there's always a disconnect kind of when you brought up funding, and I hate using funding because it's like, sure, like you can't. A, funding is really limited, B, you can't just solve problems by throwing money at it. But I will say kind of a bigger frustration is our end users don't think in county lines. They think I need to get from point A to point B. I'm not considering how many different counties or even sometimes states that might be, but we are also siloed that often, when you have to cross a line between Summit County and Grand County, that involves inter-county cooperation, and if some counties aren't cooperating, there's this disconnect between where end users, how they think about transportation, and then limitations of funding and county structures, et cetera.
Okay. This is a good start. Other thoughts online, friends?
Dave or Hope, do you guys have any additional themes you want to add right now?
Not right now.
Okay. This is definitely a start. Other things that y'all have thought of that we might need to add? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm freezing you out.
Right there on.
I know, and it's when I'm standing, like, and facilitating it, I get really hot. You can turn it off now, like, I'm feeling good.
No, I'm just trying to figure out how to think.
It's not trying to point to cool here.
It's that, yeah, I was like getting to the point where I'm like,
So I saw your
I'm-
hair.
yeah,
No. You can sit right there.
we're listening. Okay, any other themes that y'all wanna add?
I'm sure more will come up as we continue.
That's fine.
Discussing.
So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna put this over here and we're gonna
Just
start
throw one real
Yeah,
quick, in.
please,
It
please.
needs to be affordable.
affordable. Love that for us, okay.
And accessible.
Accessible.
And accessible.
Hitting every time.
Yeah, that one comment earlier about the individuals with disabilities who can't use MedRide, so we need to formulate something. That killed me. It hurt my heart. Okay. And then there are things on here.
Maybe up there, do you put on safety?
Safety. How? What specific angle? Safety. Because I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm doing coordinated planning in Gallup, New Mexico, and safety there is far different than safety here. in
Probably,
Fort Cass.
it's probably the safety I'm thinking of, because I wouldn't write transportation as a,
Oh, tell me,
by myself.
what, tell me your perspective.
I just don't feel safe. Like,
What about it doesn't feel safe? Can I drill down?
sure. I would say like the people on there, not everybody, but how do I want to say it?
No, you can say it. It's a safe place. I'm not
Well,
gonna say.
I know in Summit County, we have a huge, now the politically correct term is unhoused.
Unhoused population.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Um,
So safety,
yeah, like. I fear that I could get robbed on public transportation. Yeah.
see, and that's a perception I brought here that I'm like, oh, you didn't even think about that. Cause before my kids were driving in Durango, I just bought them a bus pass. And I'm like, you need to get downtown and go. I make my kids. But I mean, how
Figure
would
it
that
out.
be if like I worked in this industry and I didn't force my kids to ride public transit? That would be weird, right? Safety.
I think there's three aspects. There's the vehicle,
Yes,
the driver, and then the clientele.
There you go.
Oh, that's great.
That's good.
and that. Driver safety has become like a national
Yes.
thing. And you know this, you were a driver. Has become a national issue now because there have been too many incidents with unhoused, but also with the mental health crisis. And even to some extent, like in Austin, I remember those rowdy high schoolers would get out of high school and like, it would be chaos on the bus and the poor bus driver would be, you know, like you're focused on driving the bus and then you've got something going on in the back of the bus.
It's the worst, I'm
Right.
sure.
I can't,
Like,
so that has become like a bigger and bigger issue in this post-COVID era is driver safety. Like they talk about it in all the national conferences. And what do we do? So I like how you broke that down, Jonathan.
Well, and I was also throwing in there, especially with the volunteer drivers. And with the challenges that we all have in just recruiting drivers,
Yeah,
the driver themselves may not be a safe operator. Either through a lack of training or a lack of oversight.
right. So I'm gonna put a little parentheses here. Okay. Cool.
This is niche, So it may
That's
be
okay.
too small to add, but I know when we're talking specifically about the older adult population, and I don't want to overgeneralize and be like, oh, older adults don't have smartphones, or they don't know how technology works, because I think that that's ageist. But I mean, we have dealt with, we can we can help coordinate, get you where you need to go on Bustang. But you have to have that app. And you have
Yeah.
to, so I think there is, as technology in a lot of ways has streamlined things, and I've got the Bustang app and I know how to use it. There is a subgroup of people, and not only just older adults, but it requires, a level of technological understanding and comfortability, if that is a word. And the actual tools to be able to book rides. And, a lot of like, public transportation maps and scheduling, it's like really done online now,
Mhm.
which is great for me. It makes my life easy when I want to use it, but there are individuals where it is very intimidating.
The technology, yeah.
Yeah, technology gap. Thank you for summarizing my 5 minutes.
No, I think I really love that, and I also think to add to it, because I think in general, our region, we have a lot of different providers, which is awesome. But they're not all on the same platform.
No.
Like if you're gonna take Rafta somewhere and then you're like, well, I want to actually get to Grand Junction. How do I get on Bustang? So how can we have like an integrated?
Well, I just read,
Platform.
I just read an article, I think I got it from I-70 Coalition, that
Mhm.
Colorado is making that platform.
Sweet. Oh,
For
that's to look at their
all
newsletter then.
and you-
That's amazing.
And if you're riding Amtrak to Bustang to Summit Stage, you buy one ticket on the whole.
Whoa,
So
that's amazing.
Colorado is working on that.
Cool. I'm gonna have to look back at that newsletter because I
Doing
do get it.
things.
Yep,
I love that you brought that up.
yep.
Cool.
Let me add in there language and culture,
Oh, yeah, okay. Hello, yeah, of
because,
course,
you've gotta have everything,
so true.
gotta have translation, because a lot of the clientele, English is not their first language. And then secondly, understanding cultures. For example, a government operated bus means different things in different countries.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's such a good
So-
point.
First, you need to understand that. And so help with that. And then secondly, how you can facilitate.
Yeah, so without getting. Is Spanish primarily the other language we are referring to?
Yeah,
You can turn it off.
Spanish is probably the leading,
What else
But-
do we have here? That's my other question.
Russian,
yeah,
Russian and African.
a lot of Russian, African and Asian. We're starting to see a lot, so you basically kind of need to do everything in English and Spanish. But then have an avenue for all other languages.
Yeah, Summit County just overhauled their entire website. And at the very top of the website is a drop-down menu that it'll automatically translate to any language you need.
Oh,
Which-
perfect.
That's pretty great.
Well,
Although
with
it's
Google, I
not-
think everything is magical these days.
Yep,
Although it does not translate anything that's in Adobe. So
no, it
that
doesn't.
has been a challenge because
Yeah.
the maps and things will
Well-
often be in.
I was talking to someone, I'm gonna go inside and then tell you some more relevant stuff. Adobe is like in crisis right now.
Yeah, they are.
Because we were using them primarily for all of our coordinated projects for individuals with disabilities for whom you have to translate everything into, oh my gosh, my brain is failing me. Screen readers, thank you. And, that was the service that we relied on to do that, because if you're working, so like I'm technically a government contractor, but also when I'm using federal formula funds, it's a requirement to convert everything to screen reader. But also I would do that anyway, because things should be accessible, like don't exclude. Adobe in their most updated version has failed on that, along with all the AI stuff. And their value on Wall Street dropped significantly in the last couple of weeks. Like this is the whole hoodoo amongst like design crowd and also those of us who use it for accessibility checks. And you cannot use the newest version of Adobe and the online version of Adobe for accessibility checks. So the random workaround that my crew and I are actually trying to figure out is, do we buy a gray old CD-ROM or old download of Adobe and use only that version so we can work around the accessibility checks?
Wow.
Yeah, it's a whole. it's a big-
What's the PDF thing that Foxit?
Ooh,
That's
It's,
an unfortunate name, agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
it's not the greatest.
our workaround is also Affinity Designer. That's who my designer uses now. And to do all of the design work, and they have deep discounts, and they actually parlayed on the Adobe drama to go on sale for all their stuff, online stuff. Yeah, so just some pro tips. Okay, how are we doing on time? It's 11:35. Okay. The other thing I wanted to tell you is that also a shout out to, I know, this whole building. For those of you on the phone, like someone keeps closing like giant doors and it makes the whole room rattle, which is a little traumatizing.
We're not even in Santa Barbara.
I know. I lived in California for a while and my first earthquake terrified me. And that's after living in Texas with tornadoes. Mobility for all. One of the things they did, and so this is not me getting political, this is just a blank statement on the state of things and how they were. When I was working for them in 2020-ish with our, actually, this was before, this was 2016, yeah, right, 2016, 2017. So I was working for them and we wrapped their plan in 2020. And I met Angel before that. And one of the projects that they showed us was Loteria posters and cards that they used for public meetings. And the reason they did this is because during that particular presidential administration, when everyone was talking about bringing ICE to every single thing and deporting people of Latino and undocumented, even though, you know, it's touchy for me because my whole family that I've married into is Mexican. So like I get very soapboxy about it, but neither here nor there. When that presidential administration was talking about, you know, like we're gonna take away all the undocumented immigrants, it goes back to your point about government bus means different things in different countries. And so one of the things that Mobility for All in Boulder County did was they developed a Loteria system and took it specifically to flea markets, Spanish events, Latino events, all the Spanish speaking events, all the things. And they introduced this game, and the Loteria cards had bus, paratransit, commuter bus, bike, walking. They had all the mobility forms, volunteer driver, I think. And they introduced the concepts as safe to the population. Like you can ride the bus and you are going to be safe.
I love that.
And so I actually asked Angel, I was like, can I adapt this idea for where I'm working in Kern County? And I don't know if you're familiar with Kern County. Bakersfield is the main city in California, but in Kern County, there are very different demographics. So they have Tehachapi, which is like mountains and scenic. It's kind of a lot like here. And then they have the west side of the county, which is all farmland. In fact, your little blue bunny carrots and all the stuff come from there. So they have a lot of undocumented workers working on these farms, harvesting and running machinery and doing all the things. It's very well known. And they actually have a van pool system that takes the people from the cities to go to the farms. The farms even sponsor it. It's kind of like an employer sponsored shuttle. But I took borrowed, with Angel's permission, her Lafayette idea and took the posters and the game cards and everything to my meetings where it's only Spanish speakers. And it was one of those ways to fix the perception of it's okay to ride the bus and you will be safe here. So that was one of the workarounds. And so I can't wait for you to talk to her about all the things they did because they're pretty cool. That being said, are there other themes that we need to add to this list? Or thoughts?
One thing I would add is just kind of a little bit out of the box. For example, a lot of the people that utilize our services, they work during the day. So if we want to reach them, we need to meet them where they are.
That is a great point. Let me put this here. And then I'm gonna write that down. Okay.
One thought that I have had is parking. For instance, a lot of RAPTA parking is only for RAPTA. You're not supposed to park there for ride shares, other things. In Basalt, they do have Mustang parking at a RAPTA parking lot. You can park there and ride RAPTA to West Glenwood to catch the Mustang. But if someone does want to catch Mustang to connect to one of the other areas, like say you need to get over to Vail from Glenwood Springs, and you need to ride Mustang is the only option right now. If you can drive your car to the right parking lot, then you're allowed to leave your car there. But there's only like 2 places you can park. One at West Glenwood and one in Basalt. To legally park at a RAPTA parking place. So if the parking were allowed at, for instance, any RAPTA parking lot, or if the parking lots were expanded or something, I'm sure the same exists in, other communities too, where parking is an issue if you want to catch the bus. And you can drive your car to get to the bus, but then parking is sometimes too short, the parking lots aren't big enough. So I would say the parking lots would just be an issue that we could add to our list.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. So we'll add that to the list of things, strategies and things that need to be tackled. Here's what I'd like to do. This is a good brain dump of ideas and great material to work with. Excuse me. If it's okay with you.
Yeah.
I'd like to go ahead and break for lunch. And do a little magic with some goal forming for you guys, because then once we resume from lunch, I'd like to kind of show you like, hey, here's some conceptual goals. What do you think? Talk about them, and then we can actually dive into the recommendations and strategies.
Cool.
Would that work for you all? Yes.
Yeah.
This has been a really good conversation, and I appreciate all of you being so engaged and focused.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry for the people who are online that are not here to smell this delicious food.
Yeah, you guys are missing out. It's gonna be really yummy.
But we're gonna take a break. What time should we tell our online friends to resume?
Do you want to do working lunch, or do you want to like have 30 minutes to like actually eat?
I need 20-30 minutes to just do some work on the goals.
Okay.
And eat at the same time.
So how about 12:15?
Perfect.
Okay, folks online, we will be back at 12:15.
Okay. So, this is, so what we did on break, or what I did on break. I took all of the comments that you had with the themes, and then even some of the stuff that we talked about with the needs and gaps, and the who we are, and all the things, and kind of threw them into a mental hopper and said, okay, what things are alike? Like what things have commonalities, and what do we keep hearing about? And that's the whole point of the themes. And so from that, we form goals. I argue that every RTCC should have somewhere between 5 to 8 goals. 8 gets a lot. One group I worked with, one state I worked with wanted 10. But I feel like, yeah, it's just like, in my opinion, it gets unwieldy and harder to commit to if we have too many. So I just formed them into 5 for now. And this is something for y'all to, we're not adopting these are not set in stone, it's just something for you to reflect on. Like you said, we need to give people something to do and something to think about, and then we go from there. So the first one is work collectively to, can y'all hear me online? I'm a little ways from the owl. Yes, thumbs up, no?
Steve, Hope, can you hear Meredith?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
When you're
Okay.
closer to the owl, I can hear better.
Okay, I will try,
Here,
since
how
I
about we
wrote-
move the owl?
Oh, it's okay, I can stand here, Okay, the first one is work collectively to address gaps and silos in the regional transportation network. So that one is addressing, what Anne was talking about, where I'm looking at.
Silver Thorn and Friendly.
Yeah, that, and we have all these silos, we have these invisible county lines. We need inter-county transportation. It's kind of working to, and then we talked about the initial gaps in service, that's the big thing. And it's a big thing here, in this it's very specific to this region. So work collectively to address gaps and silos in the regional transportation network. That's the first one. These are in no particular order, by the way. Second one, ensure consistent operation of safe, accessible, and affordable service. And that, I don't like some of these, now that I'm reading these, I'm like, let's take this word out. See, this is why we do this, because even I can mess with these things. Okay, and so that second one is addressing, you're obviously offering services, no matter the type of service. We want to make sure it's safe. We want it to be accessible, and we want it to be affordable. So this addresses the whole safety thing that you brought up. That apparently still happens as of last night. We want it, of course, to be affordable, which is addressing what Jonathan was talking about. And then accessibility is a huge deal, period. Like, everything should be accessible.
Well, and to Hope's point, like,
Yeah.
if you don't have wheelchair ramps for,
So
you know,
crazy.
non-emergent medical appointments.
Right. What are we doing?
Yeah,
Which directly speaks to one of your main target audiences, which is individuals with disabilities. No matter the mobility device they use, that could be a discrimination lawsuit, but that's for another day. Okay, 3, encourage use of integrated technology and educate the region on the use of technology in transit. So this speaks to all this whole discussion that we had about the lack of technology, consistent technology, maps and scheduling, there's a gap in technology, providers are on the same platform. How can we have an integrated platform? All of those more specific things can fall under that goal. The other thing that I just want to say that's an aside that we don't currently have control over, but I think it bears a mention. Both in states that I've worked in, California and Oklahoma, in specifically rural areas, and I know you know this to be true here. In Alaska, as we exhibit A. The issue is not that the technology doesn't exist or that it's not consistent, because the Matsu Borough, we've been working on a 3-year rollout of a centralized dispatch platform. But that there is no internet in some areas, or you just don't have service. So I know for a fact in Talkeetna, Alaska, the older adults that try to book their rides there can't even access technology because there is no network, especially if they're close to living off grid. So they literally walk down to what is a payphone at the senior center and call in for their ride. I'm not making this up. They're very hardy there. That's a whole different, that's a whole different type of person than lives here.
We go to the grocery store, literally.
Yeah.
And you sign up on the board.
Right.
And then once a week, the satellite phone called everything up.
Yeah. Different population, they are very hardy. However, the same issue exists in Oklahoma, in rural Oklahoma, as it does in rural Alaska, in that the network is just non-existent. So that might be a thing that needs to be addressed here that you may not necessarily have control over, but it bears mentioning because that is an issue, right? Okay. Number 4, develop inclusive information and materials for educating and engaging the public. So this is speaking to the comment that was made here about the language and cultural barriers. Because we want everything that we put out to be inclusive of different languages, different cultures. We want to make sure that it's in Braille, you know, all of the things. We want to be inclusive.
May I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so my question around this is this our lane? RTCC is not actually a transportation provider. So what kind of information and materials are we disseminating for an individual utilizing transportation in Craig?
Fair question. So I see that as 2 parts, and we can probably reword if we need to clarify a little bit, which is why we're even talking about this. Number 1, obviously the providers are going to develop their own individual materials for their own systems. That is something that they need to do. However, as part of your coordinated plan, which was actually your gaps labeled as a gaps analysis, even though it's a coordinated plan, you guys are producing information on available services in the region. So who's to say that you, as a collective, don't put together a online brochure that says, you know, like, hey, what, you know, jot down your area, here's the available services, right? So it's almost like a list of service providers or a service provider inventory, which you do have in your coordinated plan.
And we did have on the website that is
no longer.
inactive.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Cool.
All right.
So same, right? Or you're just generally educating people on available services in the region as a whole.
Okay.
So it's twofold, and that's what that is addressing. Okay. I'm glad you asked that question. Last but not least, not the least important, of course, support ongoing planning, coordination, and collaboration while creating new community partnerships. So I think this is the first part of that is like, we're acknowledging that we're all trying to work together, and we have been trying to work together, right? We just lost some steam. I think there's a lot of what I'm seeing and hearing and historically, you know, all of that here is that there's a lot of people that really want to do the right thing and really want to try to work together, and there's really great intent. And so we're supporting that ongoing effort, but this also addresses the, how do we develop relationships and include others in this process? And what about, you know, engaging more partners who actually do need to be sitting at the table? Or maybe part of a little mini advisory committee, right? So that's what that's addressing. That's a lot of information I just spit at you. What are your thoughts?
I think they're really concise. And it just, I mean, you mentioned in the objective of RTCC, you mentioned all the counties.
Mhm.
I know it's particular to me, but Grand County is mentioned. Has Grand County ever participated in any of your meetings?
Well, maybe in the past.
Yeah, they have, so I think there's some big holes, Moffett County also. Maybe we have Hopi, which is awesome. But Moffett County, yes. And it, kind of moving along with that, I would almost put in number 5 as a call out, the growth of membership as well. And I think it's been great having Steve here because he can actually make a political difference.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. And I also see these goals as having like very specific activities tied to them. Yours and yours and Hope's, like, And that's where we fill in, like, these are very like broad goals. Like, this is what we strive to do. We might not do something one year. We might do others. You know, we don't have to do all of them at one time. But I think honing in on like, this is where we as a collective can truly make a difference, bounce ideas off of each other, coordinate, collaborate, advocate, whatever it is, go in on funding together. We can get, like, I mean, there's 3 projects that I already think of, like, we can figure that out as a group. And we can make it happen.
Well, I think if the CDOT busting people were here, that would make it much easier.
I think that currently there is very little interaction, coordination, collaboration with the COG Council. And a Grand County Commissioner, actually, I think the one that represents Kremling, comes to every single council meeting.
Okay.
So, and especially when we're looking in the future with Commissioner Childs, being term limited out. I think that making a stronger connection with the council where all that political will, I shouldn't say all that, where a lot of political will sits is how we're like, excuse us, Grand County, what the heck,
Yeah,
because that's part of the council.
yeah, that's a really good point.
I didn't realize they participated in the COG council and not this.
Well, and they're also participating in another huge region-wide effort that we're doing around electric vehicle chargers. So it's, one of the county commissioners is like,
Sorry.
we are doing
I should
this.
keep it out there.
What?
I think I'm on a team that's proposing on that.
Oh, it's fine.
Okay. I was like, I know that project.
Political push for rail, too.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, we talked about that at the IMTP. It's huge. but-
Well, the governor wants
Yeah,
that.
if you want to shut up.
Steve, you have your hand up.
Steve,
Yeah, if I could weigh in on that. One point, my understanding is I fill a specific position on RTCC as an elected official. I think there needs to be an elected official as a member of RTCC. It used to be John Hoffman, town council person from Carbondale. When he was term limited, then I took the spot. So when I am term limited, you need to be looking for another elected official. But perhaps that elected official who is serving on RTCC should also be a board member on the Northwest COG board of directors. So they would be at the meetings regularly and could give reports from RTCC to the Northwest COG board. That would be a way to increase the communication. So just a thought. I want to toss that out as an idea.
yeah, I added that to the park and ride, Steve,
Hey.
because you're welcome. Because there's administrative stuff that needs to be addressed that are action items that aren't directly related to what we're doing today, but are related to what we're doing today. So I will definitely type that up. That was a great
Yeah,
suggestion.
thank you. And we actually need at least 2 elected officials according to our bylaws.
Oh, so we need it. So that holds hands, so that suggestion does hold hands like with the updating your foundational documents, like make sure that we all, like if we're gonna keep it that way, which is totally fine. Then we need to make sure that we're actually sticking to them.
Yeah, the question about who needs a seat at the table is also defined in the bylaws. But I do think, I mean, like, I would suggest, I would recommend that we do review and update them because they are old and the why RTCC was created at the time with the BTCLI grant and with,
Oh, wow.
the one click
Some
one.
old school money.
Can't, I pulled that out of the recesses of the brain. That and the one click one call center, like that is not, we've evolved since then, and that is no longer the main purpose. So I do think, as a person who loves some policy, would love.
You get to be part of that working
Great,
group.
I will-
How about that?
Committee, so-
Okay, let's pause right there.
Thank you.
I love that kind of stuff.
Oh, I hate them. I like, let's
love
involve
that.
everybody. Community, come on.
Okay, so here's the fun part for you guys. I love this part for y'all. It's the best. So we have got some draft goals. These are not set in stone. I'm just gonna type them up. I'm gonna send them back to everybody to, we use a more derogatory term in my shop, but to poke holes in. And we can change them. This is something to start with. This is a jumping off point, okay? We can even add if we feel like there's a major subject or topic missing. But we need to move on to strategies and recommendations. Here's the good news. There are actually some decent things in your plan that should fall under these goals. The problem is like, they didn't even have a home. Like, they're just like,
This is
Here's-
what we recommend.
here's some recommendations, please
End.
just. Yeah, he drives me crazy. Because that's part of like my transformation in this coordinated planning realm over the last 20 years is that is what we used to do. We're like, here's some recommendations, go with God. But you can't do that because what happens is exactly this, like everyone is like, oh yeah, we've been sitting on these for 10 years and nothing has happened. So now, like I joke with some of my clients, so now you're paying me to come back in and tell you the same things. Great. This is job security at its finest. But what I tell them is, like, seriously, I said, my measure of success is when I can teach you how to do this planning matrix and an implementation plan. And you can start implementing things and you can do the plan yourself next time. And it is working myself out of a job, but there's too many folks nationally that need this level of help. So what we're going to do is actually form an implementation plan in the grand scheme of things so that when you walk away after all this work has been done, it won't all happen today. You can actually go and do the things and start, putting stuff together. So, the fun part is where we get to do a full brain dump of strategies and your recommendations and your thoughts that you had when we started today, and of things that need to be done. And then what I do is I take all of the strategy brain dump that you did today, plus the recommendations that didn't have a home from your 2021, and I put them under the goals, right? And then we put those strategies with a timeline, like here's an estimate of how long it would take you to implement this strategy. Here's an estimate of how much it would cost. And then you all get to prioritize them and rank them, like, okay, under this goal, we should do this one first.
And who's doing them?
Yes, and they are also paired with lead and primary and secondary
Yay.
agencies. And this is where you form your working groups,
Mhm.
which is an administrative thing, and you're parking right over here. Is this starting to make sense, like the madness now, what we're doing? Okay, great. I love a good implementation plan.
Me
Makes me
too.
so happy. Cause then you can actually walk away and do the work. You're like, okay, well, here we go. So the fun part for you is now you get to do a brain dump of, and it doesn't have to fall within our goal. I can put it under the goal. I will send it all to you and you get to decide what you want to keep and what you want to trash and what you want to change. You just get to do a brain dump of what needs to be done in your region. And of course, the ones who are not here today, I'm sure will have plenty more to add. So we will do that. And it's okay if they feel duplicative. What I do is I put stars next to them. If I'm hearing the same thing over and over again, I'm like, yeah, I get it. That needs to be a strategy, right? Okay. So I'm gonna label this as draft strategies. Go.
So we're going to Kremlin.
I honestly feel like,
It's a no-brainer.
it doesn't feel like low hanging fruit, but it feels like low hanging fruit. Cause
Wow.
you've got the proven
Verify and legible.
inter-county, yeah,
Yeah.
like, you've done this, you're doing this.
Mhm.
We just gotta identify who the person is in Grand County that.
To champion it.
Exactly.
And so that we can get crabby Summit County commissioners off your back, which is
Cause I,
the issue.
I've pushed as hard as I can.
And now
I
she's
can't
been
push
told not to
anymore.
work on it.
I've been, my hand has been slapped.
Why?
Because somebody on the Summit County BOCC has a disagreement with somebody in Grant County.
Oh,
And
okay.
I-
sounds like Pagosa Springs.
And I am not privy to what that person, I'm pretty sure I know who the person is. But I can't say, and
So I almost feel like that needs to be a strategy in and of itself, is like some form of high level advocacy from RTCC. And I
well,
don't
that's
know
why,
how to-
that's why.
That's why I get to go do a presentation and I'm gonna bring you all with me, not you.
That's where inviting Mustang might be really helpful. Cause they can go tell the two kids to go pound sand in the corner and.
Right?
Well, and I think also having Winter Park involved. Cause I'm sure Winter Park has employees living in Kremlin.
Oh, totally.
And our two buses could meet at Kremlin,
So coordination with Winter Park.
Kremlin, Grand County, Summit County.
Okay.
Maybe town of Silverthorne.
Well, he used to run.
Well, they help with. I know they don't have their own transit, but
I think it's mainly Summit County BOCC and Summit Stage. I mean, Summit Stage is on board.
Good point.
Well, we need to get the approval from the BOCC to move ahead.
yeah.
Yeah, but there is somebody who did. Not Charles.
I have a contact
Did you say
at Winter
Winter Park?
Park. Yeah.
That's Michael.
Who's my?
I have talked to somebody at Winter Park and they said they had run into a stumbling block at Kremlin also.
Okay, so
And-
Michael is, this is just contextual backstory. Michael is one of my partners. I partner with him on multiple projects. He is also like a BFF, just personally. He has run the system of Winter Park as a courtesy to the city for many years. Like, he's actually been trying to step away from running it because he has his own consulting business like I do, and he and I work together statewide to beat out all the big competition. So, he's a brilliant mind, and he loves this whole talk, because I told him I was gonna be up here with y'all, and he's like, oh, you know, if I need to do anything.
He used to be on RTCC.
Yeah.
What's his
well,
last name?
Michael Cook.
Oh,
KOCH.
He has so many irons in the fire, I guarantee that's like, it's not coming.
okay. I am talking to one of the Grand County commissioners.
If he can make
That,
any.
I mean, on a different project, but I can certainly.
I'll give you Michael's contact information and I tell him Meredith said that I need to talk to you, and he'll be like, oh, okay, what do you need?
Perfect.
He's very open-minded, but this is why he's been trying to back out of Winter Park. Not because he doesn't love transit, but he has too much going on.
Sure.
Like,
It's a good place
he
to
texted
start.
me yesterday and he's like, where are we with this? And I'm like, I can't talk about it. Like, I've got too many things going on myself. So, he will connect you though to any elected official that you need, because they all listen to him.
Cool.
Because he's been there for so long.
Great.
He knows what he's doing. Great human being. Okay, so that's one action item we can take away from today.
Hooray.
What other strategies?
This is really weird left field.
Okay.
So
Please do.
that's where I am.
Bring it up.
Doubt it.
Safe
Um,
space.
On our agendas, can we put our "we don't suck" mission statement at the top of it?
Yes.
Just as a reminder.
Yeah.
Every time what we're doing, maybe even put the goals in.
Yeah.
So,
Love it.
I'm gonna add that to your park and ride for an action item for your administrative stuff.
Cool. Do we need someone in Grand? Okay, Hope is asking a question. Do we need someone in transportation in Grand?
Girl, that's you.
That is you, Hope.
So.
Well, we do some of it. I mean, that's more of our ILC coordinator. That's in Grand. She like helps people find rides. So I mean, I can talk to her and see whatever we need.
That's it. So I think that's a great question, Hope, because I also think it speaks to shifting a little bit on a different goal is around freaking like getting everybody who's here, although it is a small group, this is a very engaged group.
Yes.
So that's good. I'd rather, I'm, as if this is like my group, but I think like as a participant in this group, I would rather have a smaller, more engaged group than have this whole table be full and everyone's on their phones, you know?
Yeah.
But I do think that that's one of the goals is around the membership of this group. And I don't, it might be getting too much in the weeds. I think having Mountain Family Center as the transportation provider in Grand for older adults. And I think that would be a good ask. And then I was going somewhere else with that too, as far as I guess it's the bigger conversation around like, how do we it's almost like we need to sell ourselves again to be like, no promise, like we're not just meeting to meet, and we're not having meetings where you're just going over the number of NEMT rides in the past quarter, like those were painful. So it's like, really need a cohesive strategy around like,
Yeah.
no, this is not the same RTCC and here's what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think when all of this is like in one spot, I think we can say, hey, this is a coordinated group. This is our new face. We are coming to these meetings to do work, to have productive conversations, to connect. And if you are part of this group, you will see results, but that means you have to show up. And, you know, what's gonna make you show up?
Maybe it's like if you can make a really lovely one pager with the goals and then those implementation categories, and then you go to a Grand County Commissioner and you see this bullet point right here, this is you, we
Yeah.
need you, you
Yeah.
belong here.
I
Like,
love that.
yeah, and so it's very specific to you. This is a dynamic group that you need to be a part of because it is going to achieve your goals as well as a commissioner, as a transportation provider, whatever.
Yeah,
We have,
love it.
where is it? I know exactly what you're talking about, because that's what my guy does, is develop like 1 to 2 page flyers that are designed for elected officials to explain a concept like this and why it matters.
Yep, I love that.
We even do
That's
like a
what
6.
CDOT does for all of our IMTPR projects for status updates, and they're lovely.
Yeah, they actually, to their credit, do a great job with
Yes.
graphics. I don't know who does it in-house, but okay.
Yeah.
We also develop 6 page briefing books if we need like, peer studies.
I like the 1 to 2 pager.
Yeah,
That's
otherwise they get
yeah.
overwhelmed. We did
Yeah,
that for
they-
Nevada's mobility management thing to do an ask for statewide funding legislation for mobility management.
That's a great idea too, because it could also.
It could be an
double-
advocacy tool
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah,
totally.
so I kind of developed like, maybe we need to add, like, develop advocacy tools for RTCC.
Yeah,
Woof.
because I think like simple ones that all of us feel comfortable talking about, like if we're at if Jonathan's at a Steamboat Springs City Council meeting or something, like he can say, hey, this is what we're working on and this is how it directly relates to Steamboat, why we need to be at the table and why we will benefit from it. Cause that's the problem with advocacy stuff usually is it's so up here. But people get overwhelmed and they're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to say.
Well, I think along with that, you can also put what other counties are doing or other, like if we get the Kremlin. That's being done and sometimes that gets the attention of other political bodies to say, ooh, we don't want to be in last place.
And that's what the summit's gonna point out too. Like, what are other small, rural, urban, doesn't matter, they're all trying to do the same things in a way that we are.
Right.
What's working?
Yeah, plagiarism is awesome.
For sure, we're not trying to recreate anything here.
Tried that in college, it didn't work. Yes.
Plus, I think with, I think that's a question out there, goodness. Once you start that level of sharing too, it could be not just like, oh, we don't wanna be left behind, but it's like, oh, we've been wanting to do this too, let's go learn from them, or let's collab, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Other things. I feel like we're all running on fumes right now, cause it was like, everyone started the day with like, let's talk about all the problems, and now it's like, let's talk about the problems, and you're like,
Why don't you bring up yours, Mandy, that we've been talking about since I started?
Yeah, so there's no paratransit from Carbondale to Aspen. Really?
Oh,
so no paratransit.
Hold
from
on,
where?
Steve.
Carbondale to what?
Aspen.
Okay.
I could jump in. One thought of an action item that would be for me to take on would be a letter from me as chair of RTCC to all the elected officials in our region.
Oh, yeah.
One purpose would be to say that we need to get more, at least one or two more elected officials serving on the RTCC, and briefly explain the 4 meetings a year. These are our 5 goals that we are working on achieving, that sort of thing. Second purpose would be to invite them all specifically to the summit in September.
I love that,
And we could
Steve.
send that to each board of county commissioners, each town council in our whole region should get that letter. And I could write I think I should write a draft of it and get it to Dana, and then Dana could edit it, and that to me would be a good thing to do now.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think Steve, are you able to work on that, like maybe within the next week? And then that way we give folks enough time, because the summit's next month.
Yeah.
You need to get on
Yeah.
the council agenda in
Mm,
August
yeah.
and talk about it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not to be bossy.
And within the next week works, I'll be back in Fairbanks on, I think, Monday night, where I'll have really good internet connection there, and it'll be easier for me to, and I'll have electricity also, so I'll be able to operate a little easier.
I'll be back to civilization.
Steve, you need to lead a master class on how every single county commissioner should be just like you.
I agree.
And I'm
Yeah.
so like super involved, supportive, and you show up. And I'm just so sad that you're turning out, because I have loved working with you, because you lead such a important role as my chair of my committee too. So I don't know, you're the best.
I was
Yeah.
wondering, did you take public
Thanks.
transit all the way up to Alaska? Not including airplanes.
You just rode the
Actually,
bike.
there is public transit. It's the ferry system.
Yep,
And
yep,
it runs all the way up there.
Yep.
It's-
Yeah, everyone
Step
forgets
up,
about the
Steve.
ferry system on the west
Yeah.
coast.
Put your tent out on top of the deck. It's great.
The other thing I want to add for you all, just as an aside too, is that all the things that you brought up in advance that are more specific to projects, I will also include as strategies under your goals. So that way I would rather have, here's what I would rather have. A big laundry list of things that we can winnow down and prioritize than not enough stuff to do, which doesn't sound like a problem here. But that way it's more for you to work with, right? So I'll make sure that stuff gets included too. Okay, other thoughts?
Again, this is left field, but
It's okay, you have good ideas, I like it.
no. Have to write that down, take it back to my council. Council meetings involve suicide watch. So
God.
the first thing I think is to have homework before the meeting. Because a lot of times you spend the first part of the meeting just thinking about stuff, whereas we're gonna be discussing these topics, you can think about it and then come to the meeting with ideas. And then, I found you get better participation when they're fairly short meetings. I mean, it's good to have this kind of long, in-depth meeting, but I think for some of the catch-up meetings, it'll be an hour.
Yeah,
Well,
I think once we get ourselves established, we're
Like,
gonna be like, working groups, give your updates. Do you have
That's
asks?
exactly what
Do
you
you
do.
have challenges? Do you have successes?
what do you need?
Yeah,
Right.
cool, let's move on.
That's where I think that homework could be done, where you write that all out. Everybody gets that, comes to the meeting with that,
Yep.
and the subgroups could be those quick hour meetings.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question for you all then. Because it sounds like. And Dana, I'm beginning to even see all this unfold in my mind as to like, when we start talking about this, why we were asking these questions. There's some back. End administrative stuff that needs to be done for our TCC.
Yeah, happy
All
to do
stuff
it.
that needs to be done, right? So then my question is, because there's been a lot of like. This and then all of these things here. To me, what that says is, there's two options. We can either work it into a draft goal, where we just talk about the specifics of forming practice and policy for our TCC and then put all these as strategies. Or sometimes if there's not a lot of it, I just make. I usually do like a next steps for regions, like here's, some back end administrative stuff that needs to be done. You guys, what I'm hearing today, have actually more than the typical group. And that's not a bad thing. It just tells me that you're being really thoughtful about like, how do we move forward from here and how do we almost reinvent ourselves? So that's my question is, would you prefer that these types of things fall under a specific goal? And then we give you these strategies that you check off and you work on it together, or do I just formulate like a whole next steps for you guys as you roll into the goal checking off thing?
I think for me, if I have my own category of like, okay, administratively, all of this stuff would be helpful aligning with the direction that we're going. That is the second document of these are our goals and our strategies.
Right, okay. That's fair.
Because then I can say, hey, after our strategy meetings, this is what we all talked about. This is what I am doing to help support
Okay,
you all moving forward.
so I can create like a Dana document
Yep.
of administrative stuff for RTCC that needs to be accomplished.
Yep.
Perfect. I just wanted to be clear because.
No, I think that makes sense and it will help me because honestly, I've been kind of floating in space.
Well,
Like
it's hard when you don't have direction. That you can do.
nothing.
And it's like,
Yeah.
and even in my role as facilitator, I will never do anything in a vacuum. I want
Oh,
direction from
no.
you guys,
And
right? I'm sure you're
yeah,
the same way. It's
nope.
like, you tell me what you need. and
I
then
want the
will do
group
it.
to tell me what is best, what they want, how they want it done, and I will support it however I can.
Right. Okay, super. Okay, so what other, okay, we're hearing a lot of really great administration. Thank you, Jonathan. How long have you been here? Part of this group?
Since day one. I don't know when we
What was
started.
day one?
I wanna say mid-2000s.
Okay.
Remember we met Breckenridge.
2010,
Jonathan.
I think it was even before that.
was it? Okay. No, this is really helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've been here for a minute. Do you know what's funny is I guess there should be term limits, but the chair of RTCC, capital area RTCC in Austin, has been the chair. Or not been the chair, but he's been participating in RTCC. He was the chair for multiple years because no one else stepped up and he's been participating in that same committee for 19 years now, since it was formed.
Just like Garfield County BOCC.
I mean, he's well intended, so it doesn't hurt anything. He's almost like, he's been there for so long, he's like a historian, he's like, remember when?
Of that,
Yeah, he's been there since 2005.
You
Well,
think of
in
it
your
as
case-
odd, just 'cause
Great
they've done
asset.
it over and over.
Yeah,
And
okay.
you Get to the stop sign, you're in luck.
Okay, what else?
Folks on the phone, what other strategies?
One thought I've had is to not structure, but I guess part of my inspiration for trying to regenerate what RTCC is to make it kind of like the elected officials transportation committee, which exists between Aspen, Picken County, and the town of Snowmass Village. So each council member and each board of county commissioners serves on that. So it's a 15-member board of elected officials who get together once, and we're supposed to meet 4 times a year. Lately, it's been like once or twice a year, but we can actually we have to approve a budget, and we dispense millions of dollars of budget money for transportation stuff in our upper Roaring Fork Valley area. Now, I don't envision RTCC being all elected officials. That'd be a serious mistake. We want to have, some elected officials, a lot of transportation experts, regular citizens, transportation users, people representing the different user groups. That's what we want our board to be. But it would be specifically for looking at a broader area of transportation issues. So perhaps, and the EOTC has been kind of dysfunctional lately. We can't get together to have a meeting because we can't get a quorum for whatever reason. I don't know. It's crazy, but I think maybe if we kind of look at what EOTC does in the Roaring Fork Valley, and maybe we can get some ideas from that for what we can do on a regional basis.
So you like that they get things done for the most part?
So that would be something I mean, I could jot down some ideas on that and maybe bring it to the summit for part of the brainstorming there.
I'm gonna add that to the list of admin items for you and Dana to circle back around on, Steve.
Okay.
Perfect, okay.
I mean, I think that's something we can look at in the existing bylaws too, because I think we are designed to function that way and have a certain number of members. We just haven't been doing much. So yeah, we might not have to make a lot of changes. It's just, how are we getting people to the table now that we are doing things? I think is going to be the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
Well, I think if they see that we're doing things, that will encourage people to join.
We just need one win.
Yeah.
Well, it's because they don't, and also it's like, I view it as like kind of, this is me being neurotic, because he's totally me saying this, but it's also true. If you're a control freak and you're OCD and you see that things are happening, you want to get involved because you're like, oh, I don't want them, like, I'm like, I gotta go over there and see what
I
we're
want to be
doing.
a part of it.
I
Yeah.
want to be a part of it. Nothing without me,
Mhm.
which is psychotic, I know, but it is what it is. It's good. It's the way a lot of people operate. Steve?
But along those lines, if what we're doing pertains to all the different 7 counties, then they might be interested. For example, I'm supposed to be part of the I-70 coalition meeting. Nothing they talk about pertains to Summit Stage, really.
It really.
And I just tune out for the whole meeting because it doesn't pertain to me. And so, and since it's on my day off, I just send in an update now. I don't even attend the meetings because nothing pertains to me. But if we have these goals that pertain to all the different counties, then they might be encouraged to attend.
See, we're gonna be better than I-70 Coalition.
Yeah.
Nothing against them, they have a different function,
Yeah, it's all I-70, which that's the goal.
and it's
I-
advocacy.
Right.
It's different than having coordinated efforts, I think.
Yeah, definitely, because this is like, ultimately what you're looking for here are. There's a few things, there's some small wins, low hanging fruit type things.
Mhm.
There's agreed upon priorities that you've prioritized, that you're gonna move forward with, that you have a timeline and funding for. And you have a lead agency who is helping drive that forward, because. And this is a step further into trainings that I do for this level of coordinated planning, but. Once you have your matrix in place and you're implementing things and you're showing people that you've implemented and you've got performance metrics to show how you're doing. Then they're gonna, that is what continues your momentum forward with elected officials and regional partners and the like, because they want to get in on the next round of like, oh. When is our next update? Well, guess
Yeah.
what? It's in 5 years. So and yours is actually less than, because it was 21, so. You'll be doing 26. For an update.
Sure.
Federally mandated,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
yeah.
That's
So,
right.
but this is a great. Middle point to say, okay, we've now got all this stuff in place and everybody's on board and we're moving, this train has left the station, we are moving forward. So that's the whole point.
Continuing with the psychotic theme. One of the things I think that could be successful is to invite elected or experts or whoever, basically whoever's not showing up, invite them to come. Hey, we're interested in Kremlin regional transportation. Is there somebody on the town council that could come speak to us about for 5 minutes about what's happening?
Yeah,
And then they show up, give their presentation, they feel important.
And then they
Their
fight Ann.
presentation would be like 5 seconds.
And then they fight Ann. It's a cage fight with Ann.
Well, sometimes with those people, when you ask them to do a presentation, that is only 5 seconds. They figure out, ooh, we gotta do something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's just it, right?
and this group can be our allies and
Right.
help us to figure it out.
But I'm gonna be embarrassed for 4 minutes and 55 seconds if I don't start talking to somebody.
Well, and that's the way to do it, because like, it's funny, because you said. You referenced suicide watch after council meeting. My husband's a city manager, but that's the way they get the mayor involved, is if she's asked to speak on a topic. And she's like, what are we doing in this area? And then she has staff put something together and it's like, oh, we're not doing anything in this area.
There's our answer.
Yeah, that, so, that's a really great idea. I like that, John.
Well, that goes into what Steve was saying, that he wants to invite a bunch of elected officials to our meeting in
see-
September.
Yeah, some of this is definitely admin, but some of this can actually fall under strategy with the coordination and collaboration piece, so I'm gonna put it in both for sure.
Yeah,
Other,
their 5 minute presentation too, that keeps them from hogging on the fire. Which can happen. With our elected officials, I'm sure it doesn't happen with anybody else, Steve not included, but.
yeah, all right, what else?
I think something that Dana is already doing, and I think it can be added as a continuation of something that you're already doing well and but important to keep the first goal moving forward. Is, we're having this summit and you've already brought some really interesting speakers to, is this your only your third meeting since you've
Yeah.
become? Yeah, so just in like your short amount of time, you've already had some like interesting, replicable, or, just neat ideas that other areas are doing, or even folks within our region are doing, and bringing that to the table. So I think that whole like working collectively has to do with bringing ideas to the table, things that are replicable, things that are interesting, things that are innovative, and you're already doing that. So
Well, thank you.
you're welcome. Just
And kudos to this group who's like, we want to do a summit and this is what we want to do. So. Yeah,
Well, the energy is much appreciated.
Yeah.
Everyone
Cool.
is.
I mean, this is my background. This is what I came from in food access world, so I did collective impact and community engagement and leadership from the ground up. So this is what I do.
But this group also like. Is everyone here that I've heard from, it seems like everyone's really well intentioned and.
Oh, yeah.
The collective wants to move forward, so it almost makes your job super,
It does. That's why I told
Easy.
you this group would be fun, is because we're all like
this group is great.
bringing different pieces and we all want to see things happen. We just don't have a lot of concrete traction with it right now. And I think we will very soon, which is so exciting.
So the energy is here and the intent is good, which is great, because that's not always true for every single RTCC I work with. Some of them are out to sabotage each other. So, other strategies or things that we have not talked about or have not been brought up at all today, because I'm going to take the collective, including what was in 2021, and put them in a matrix with your goals.
Mhm.
But is there anything else that you're like, oh, we didn't talk about XYZ?
I think those, yeah, definitely those 3 gaps on 2021.
Okay.
Well, 2 of the 3
Well,
that
we
we
talked
haven't
about
talked
busing
about.
increasing service, but
Yeah, I think the Craig to Grand Junction, that is significantly brought up and needed.
okay.
Um,
And is that, I mean, we talked about them increasing service, but is that part of that or no?
it should be. That's what we've talked about in this group.
But we
Is-
don't know for sure.
It's on, like, Transit Rail Advisory Committee,
Oh, sweet.
I know it's not. But,
I think they made an announcement and.
Yeah, so that is
Oh.
part of their plan, but busting has been far more successful than they kind of thought.
Oh, totally.
So as a result, they've got all these increases in ask. And so I think it's really important, this is on their list,
Cool.
but to keep pushing it.
July 27th this year. CDOT is expanding 3 of its most popular bus staying routes with 4 additional trips on the West Line between Denver and Glenwood Springs.
Will you send that to
But
me?
that
Because I
doesn't,
think that's,
that's not
That doesn't
Grand
necess-
Junction.
no, it's not
Right,
Grand Junction.
Right, but, and then 2 additional trips on South Line and 1 on the North Line.
This is the
So-
presentation I heard at the I-70 Coalition
Oh.
about busting, like, we are doubling our services on the West Line.
Which is
Yeah.
interesting because we're trying to tap into
So-
that same thing in the Southwest too.
Right.
So they can.
Ridership on bus staying in 23 was up 25%, which sounds pretty substantial to me.
Go ahead,
Just
Mandy.
the west
In
side
the
or
transit
something?
world.
Well, no, bus staying
2%
It's
total.
that line,
Yeah.
like,
That
It
is.
is.
yeah,
Yes.
it won't just be like a one-way.
Okay.
So the West Line is like along I-70, that east-west line, yeah.
But I think.
But it seems like they need to add Grand Junction in there. It seems
Craig to
like-
Grand Junction, yeah, I think that is a significant gap.
And I think if the RTCC was to come to CDOT and say, as a collective,
Mhm.
we have decided that
This is a
these
priority.
routes, Craig to Grand Junction through Rifle and
Yes.
Kremling to, so we thought are our 2 priorities.
Ooh, I like
That
that.
was the same thing. So that's the same thing we did with RTCC Southwest. Because Pagosa Springs was building, or we haven't put the RFP out yet, but I'm helping them with that. The RFP for a new park and ride with a purposeful transfer for best staying outrider to connect Pagosa Springs to Durango and then Durango to Cortez with MoCo Transit. And they were all at the table and asked RTCC to write a letter of support for the park and ride with the whole bus staying theme and the regional connectivity, which are equivalent of you, Dana, was like, oh yeah, we basically say we're getting behind this with regional connectivity, and CDOT for sure won't say no. So it's kind of on that same
I
thing,
like that.
right? Because it's basically like you all as regional partners are coming together to agree, like, we need to connect the region better. And they like that too, because then they give us money.
I think that, where would that fall? That's probably goal 5.
Yes, well, ongoing
1 or
planning.
5.
It would be 1 or 5, and really, I just kind of measure like what it is that it's doing and then fit it in the best place.
Yeah,
Cause that's technically coordination, collaboration, but it's also addressing your gaps in the regional transportation network.
I like that idea of us collectively saying, these are 2 priority routes, bus staying, that we have identified we want you to work on.
Remind me, what was it? So Craig to Grand Junction and Silverthorne to what?
Friendly.
Okay.
And isn't it, Glenwood Springs to Grand Junction?
No, they're already focusing on that.
Okay, because right now, their article says, it's, Denver to Glenwood Springs that they're increasing service, not Grand Junction.
Not Glenwood to Grand Junction?
Not Glenwood to Grand Junction.
But they're not increasing the service to Grand Junction.
Interesting.
So me, but if
Yeah.
if I know correctly, and correct me when I'm lying too much, Steve, but I think that the raft serves Rifle, is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
but very
So
limited.
the Craig to Grand Junction goes through Rifle. So if we can make sure that that has a connection.
They can connect in Rifle, they
Right.
can get on the bus stand.
And CDOT absolutely loves it when communities say, this has no effect on us, but we have agreed that for our region.
Right.
this is the best.
So they would just need to go Craig to Rifle essentially, because bus stand goes Rifle to Grand Junction.
Well, I'm thinking that you could get an additional trip if you go Craig to Rifle to Grand Junction.
Yeah, so then.
Yeah,
you're not-
that makes
And they're
sense.
not having to. Like if I'm the person who's utilizing the service, I don't have to swap service, I can just stay on.
Yeah.
Like when
that's
the
true.
airline has a layover on Southwest and they don't make me get off the plane. Sherry. What else?
Couple of thoughts on that. I think right now there are three trips that continue from Glenwood to Grand Junction every day. I think it's 3.
Yep, there's 3.
And there are 5 that go from Glenwood to Denver, so there are 2 that end in Glenwood right now. Maybe those should start in Rifle, and then they could connect with the Craig to Grand Junction route. So if someone needed to go from Craig to Glenwood Springs, they would have a good connection there. If someone was going from Glenwood to Craig, they could connect. They could ride the Raptor or Mustang, I guess, to Rifle and then go north to Craig or to Grand Junction. But they could end up with, in effect, 5 trips to Grand Junction every day from Denver. You could get there on Mustang by maybe adding 2 trips from Craig to Grand Junction every day or something like that. It's just a scheduling thing where if the buses could meet partway in Rifle and some people could transfer on to that and get to Grand Junction would be good.
Yeah, and that would go to bus stand. We don't have to figure that out, thankfully.
Well,
Yeah,
we did,
it's a scheduling thing for Mustang, but we could urge them to figure that out. One thought I had earlier was, and then maybe it's just an accessibility thing in our goals, would have to do with improving pedestrian access to things, and it could include curb cuts for wheelchairs or people who can't go up and down the curbs. It could include putting good bicycle racks and bicycle storage things at bus stops, so people could ride their bike there. They wouldn't have to drive a car. It could mean building sidewalks to make pedestrian safety more important. And maybe our role in this whole thing would be to look in each community, or have each community try to determine where they have issues, where they could make improvements for the pedestrian and bicycle safety to get people to the transit stops safely and comfortably. And then we could put together a whole list of this and conglomerate it, and as a whole region, maybe go after a bunch of money and projects to fix these things. And that might be just in our accessibility goal, part of the goal from the 5 goals, but I think that's important that we look at that.
See, we haven't met, but I really like you.
We just brought that up in our transit board meeting yesterday.
Oh,
That,
nice.
unincorporated Summit County, there's a lot of areas without good pedestrian walkways.
Mm-hmm.
Alright.
And I would say, yeah, first and last mile connections. It could be
Mhm.
transit, it could be bicycle.
And maybe
pedestrian.
the whole maybe the micro transit thing comes into that discussion too, for people who need to be picked up at their door to get to where they need to go. Some people can't get on, they can't use the sidewalks, so.
Mm-hmm.
The presentation from somebody in Eagle County
Yeah.
about, was that an RTCC meeting? Or
Was it
that-
Avon and Edwards?
Yeah.
Their metro districts talking about, they were trying to get CDOT to reduce speed
Yeah,
limits.
was that here or was that?
It was
a
at
council
RTCC,
meeting?
it was at both,
Okay.
yeah, it was at both.
Yeah, that was a great,
That was a really good presentation.
that was a great presentation.
It was essentially some metro districts coming together in Eagle County to advocate for CDOT to lower the speed limit through a very heavily trafficked pedestrian area.
Oh, yeah.
And creating
And-
consistency in like pedestrian crosswalks.
Yes,
Because that was the other thing, that in Eagle County, there were multiple types of pedestrian crosswalks. And to increase safety,
Mhm.
kind of having some consistency.
Oh, I ran into that yesterday when I was driving through there. Some kid on a bike rode out in front of my car. I know, I was like, oh my gosh, like as a parent, I was like,
well, and metro districts they typically don't have support from the counties that they're in. They don't. And that's unfortunate because there's a lot of people that do live in metro districts. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Anne.
I'll be in touch, Dave.
Yeah, for sure.
hey, Anne, thank you. It was really nice to.
Yeah.
Nice meeting you too.
I'm just so
Drive
obsessed with
safe.
your vibe.
I know.
Okay, I
You're
was like,
awesome.
what is she reminding me of? And I've settled on a dragon. I'm just so here for your vibe. It's so amazing.
I love comments.
Thank you so much for all your
Thanks,
great
you.
input today. Bye. She's so good.
Sometimes if you can get just that one simple win, one crosswalk,
Mm-hmm.
one bus.
Yeah.
And in Colorado, if you're on a bike, you don't have to stop, you just go until the sun's expensive.
Yeah.
That's actually something I'm really confused about, because I thought that recently law had changed so that bicyclists don't have to stop anymore. And then in Breckenridge, on the bike path, they put out this sign that was like, you must stop. And it's like a bike path stop sign.
Oh, we have bike path stops all along the Rio Grande Trail, from Aspen to Carbondale. If you're a bike, you must stop. When you come to a road or a driveway, you have a stop sign.
The law is that if bicyclists have to treat stop signs as yield signs,
Yeah.
or
Just saying.
ignore them like car drivers ignore yield signs.
Yield or ignore, no stopping anymore.
Who's biggest or fastest?
Okay. Other things. I think this is a pretty hefty list to work with, and you're gonna wanna weed through it when we're done. But I don't wanna leave anything off if we feel like it's super important.
I mean, I really would love to add volunteer driving.
I know.
Yeah. I think that's great.
That's really all I run off of anymore is volunteers.
I know that that's a big ask, and maybe.
No, it's not.
But
And
this-
the
It's
turn,
not.
the turn on the research project is a year at best. We're supposed to be done with it in a year. So. At that point, then you'd have all the resources in the world to draw on.
except for the volunteers.
Well, and maybe there is, in the meantime, maybe we can get very creative.
That's what's up
and
on my screen right now, volunteer driver. program.
Find pockets of funding that could incentivize volunteer drivers. I don't know where that would come from, certainly not CDOT, but actually, it could come from 5310.
I heard of a cool program and I don't know where it is and I've been Googling it, so whatever that's worth. But a volunteer driver program where if you are a volunteer driver, you get free oil changes, reduced prices for tires. And there are certain repairs, well, certain repair shops that if you are a volunteer driver and you call them up that you need a vehicle repair, you go to the top of the list. And that has helped in like the companies that are doing the oil changes and the tires and things like that. They're able to use this as a tax write-off.
Yeah.
And so you don't necessarily even have to get the funding.
It's so creative.
And I was gonna write it down, but I was driving and flipping people
Was
off.
it in a
so-
different state?
Well. That's when you drive. One cell on the side,
It was
one-
you behind me. I'm just
Well,
kidding. I'm just
Yeah, I can
kidding.
flip you off with both fingers, because I would have been watching myself.
With the knee on the steering wheel.
Yes, yeah, that's what you're used to. And your knee holds your sandwich. But it was somewhere back on the East Coast. I'm
East
not
Coast,
sure-
okay.
Sure where.
We'll look for that in our study.
Yeah, but I thought it was kind of a cool idea.
I love that.
Yeah.
And you had to volunteer like a certain
Sure.
number of hours per quarter or something like that. But a lot of people were using it because they were having trouble getting their car maintained.
Mhm.
So if I'm a volunteer driver, I only have to do 20 hours.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I love that. I will ask CDOT though about 5310 because it does pay for coordinated efforts. And if this is something that we identify as like, hey, we need X amount of volunteers, can we pay them this much to get people to where they need to be? Cause I'm already asking them about community compensation.
Right.
Because if we're paid to be here and we eventually get riders and, users of transportation as decision-making folks, we need to pay them for their time. So I think that kind of falls into the,
So, yeah, funding to incentivize drivers, compensation, something. Okay. Anything else?
You just collectively felt the energy level.
I know,
Wow,
everyone's like,
that's
okay, my brain's done.
we did a lot.
You did more than most of my teams do.
We get a gold star, we get a gold star.
I would just add other. And so as part of the homework, when this gets sent out, if people. 'Cause,
Oh, yes.
Yeah, other,
We need others to give input on this.
Cause-
Like Raph
yeah,
is not
yeah.
here, Core left.
Cause I feel like once they see it and start to brainstorm on their own, we give them a couple of
Yep.
weeks and say, you need to at least give me comments back.
Yes.
There's gonna be a whole other new laundry list of things, or like, hey, this isn't a go, why? Typically, with this process, what we do is I type all the things up, I send them to Dana, she sends them out, asks for comments on specific things like the goals and the strategies. And then we would typically meet again to do a prioritization workshop where we actually weed through everything and do the hard work, which is
Yeah.
we prioritize. And then that also falls into the same thing of like, who's the lead agency and who's gonna do the work groups. So that's more, it's like both implementation plus admin stuff that would happen. And usually those meetings are, a little bit apart because it gives people time to respond and. I mean, cause even with you guys, we'll walk out of here. And even I do this, and I'll be like, oh yeah, we didn't talk about that. That should probably be a thing we talk about, or at least add.
Yeah, all good transit ideas occur at 3:30 AM.
Yeah, that's why we keep a note next to
I'm
that.
so glad I don't.
Then you wake up in the morning and you go, what?
I know,
Rain
Who wrote this
to follow the bus?
yeah. So typically that's what that's the process. I defer to Dana on what our next steps are.
No, that is exactly,
We want,
yes.
I'll let you come back, we come back.
Oh, yeah, this
Yeah.
is not the only time that
Let's do
Meredith
this
is gonna,
again. Let's
Okay.
do the
Be here.
prioritization.
yeah,
Okay,
so this will hopefully be in November.
so then that gives people a long time to reflect, which is totally fine. It's a matter of making sure that they do the homework,
Well, and I think
but it gives you time to do the administrative stuff.
we could also say, when I'm presenting this to everyone, here are work groups. Do people like these work groups? If so, we're going to start whatever that looks like. I don't know if that's like cart before the horse.
No, because you and I can sit down and have an offline on like, here's the recommendations for what work groups
Like
we
we
have.
can, yeah, we can form our work groups.
And then you can say, here's the work groups, let us know what you'd like to be involved in. Because technically, every member of your RTCC should be involved in at least one work group to do the actual things. There may
And that
be
will
people
need
who
to
are
be
super
added to the
passionate.
bylaws.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's what I would do.
We should also add like an initiation ceremony where it's like,
Hazing.
you know, like blood brothers and.
I think, and with these work groups, we can meet before November. Like,
Did we do the handouts at the summit?
Oh, that's a thought.
handouts of join the working group.
Yeah, which one do you want to be a member of and which one do you want to be an alternate to? And you have no choice.
Oh, that's a good idea.
It's called voluntold.
Members and alternates.
Do you guys have alternate attendees for your members of RTCC? Because that's what we did to
Do
make
you
sure.
see how many people showed up?
That's just an admin suggestion for your bylaws, is that each member needs an alternate.
Yeah.
Because, you know, things happen, but at least then it ensures that you've got attendance and people at the meetings.
The summer will be interesting, and I think I need to reconvene the planning team about like, what's our agenda here? Like, I feel like I'm getting confused.
You need to sign as an alternate.
I'm misspelling things, so just ignore. Which working group?
Just draw a squiggle one.
I know.
Ooh, cause we're gonna do transit trivia, which
Yeah.
Anne's gonna lead. Cause she came up with some awesome questions. We could have like a QR code that people have to scan and say. Who, like, you're gonna list out your alternate, so it goes to like. Our spreadsheet, like this is. I don't know.
Okay.
It's not gonna be relevant to everyone. It's the. Yeah.
You know what I need from you, Dana, because I'm thinking now about my transportation providers, which I haven't even sent the summit flyer to.
It's okay, we just finished it. You were gone when we finished it, I think.
Oh, yeah, you were.
Yes, I
Yeah.
did send it to the group, in Eagle County, I don't know, collaborative thing.
Oh, yeah,
I
Kid
dared to ask.
collaborative.
But. What else am I trying to find? So, oh, yeah, so I just realized that it could be a really great thing to invite Mountain Family Center because they provide transportation in Grand County and Jackson County Council
Yeah.
on Aging. But I'd love a little like, I need you to help me sell it, and so I need a blurb that's like,
Okay,
this will help you.
That's one thing we
out
didn't really come
Oh,
up with.
yeah.
But I can send the blurb. I've like, the keynote was like, what do you want me to talk about? And I was like. You know, this is about collaboration and learning and, you know. How are we regionally looking at examples that are being presented, advocating together. Yeah, I'll come up with something.
Compare the exciting rollout of the read formatted RTCC.
Oh, yes, I could.
It's already
We
getting.
want to throw some excitement in. It's exciting. Oh, okay.
All right, since we're on PMs, anything else for the good of the order?
It's been really great. Thank you for facilitating.
Yeah, as you can see, this is my favorite thing.
I'm so excited for what this is gonna become.
Yeah.
So I gotta tell you a funny Michael Cook story.
Oh, please
So
share.
we sold.
Wait, hold on, are we done? Are we adjourning?
We're adjourning, you can go,
Oh,
unless someone else has something.
I make a motion to
Oh,
end the
yeah.
meeting.
Ah,
I was
yes.
leading the meeting.
Why is everyone looking at me?
We are adjourning, so.
Aaron made a motion.
Jonathan
I'll
seconded.
second.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, Hope. Thank you, Steve. We'll have a ton of stuff to send out to the group. Yeah, you'll be hearing from me soon.
Have fun in Alaska.
Okay, bye.
Thanks,
Oh,
guys.
yeah, it's beautiful. I've been fighting mosquitoes all the time.
I don't
I
envy
put my
you.
hood up, put my head net on, I
my
put my
God.
gloves on, so there's no skin to show.
Oh, Steve, you're funny. We'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye.
Bye.